Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Thompson. And apparently, I have a thing for bald headed, handsome men. Aaron Quinn is out, and then I have Sal Capaccio, and now my man Joe Marino. Joe, how we doing?
Gregory, I'm well, and whatever is behind you looks really awesome. Like a Zuba Buffalo print, like that is sick.
Yeah, thank you. A lovely lady that sells her wares on Etsy. If anyone would like to look, I believe it's In the Ivy 716 is her tag on Etsy. It's actually crazy 3D layered paper. So like each different color is a different layer on there, and if you look close, it's actually very 3D and kind of coming out of the thing. But yeah, it's really cool. I was very very impressed with it, and she made us a kind of custom one that says Cover One Buffalo. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, sick. Jealous of that. Nice piece there for the background, man.
Appreciate it, brother. So for anyone who is joining tonight who is living under a rock and do not know Joe from his wares at Locked On Bills, over at the Draft Dudes podcast, and obviously on the Draft Network itself, make sure you're checking that out. Make sure you're giving everything a listen over there. Fantastic daily coverage, and part of that's what we're going to talk about here tonight. So, now that we're back into football, thank God there's actually football on our televisions right now. There's TV, football being played. What are your overall thoughts on camp so far, being back to football and obviously a huge passion of yours?
It feels good. It feels right. Makes you hate last year even more and appreciate what we have. Just knowing that you're getting updates from practice and they're on the field and there's going to be fans in the stands and seeing preseason games with people in attendance. It's all good. And I love what football means for, so many people in our culture, and it just feels regular again. And man, you never, like, it's weird to me that we're even talking about fans being in the stands as something that's weird or rare
or needing to be a bonus or excitement.
Yeah, it's like, what? So, I'm into it all, man. Football all day, every day for me, but this year feels a little bit more special. I got to be honest.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to be able to feel normal again. I was able to go out to the practices they had open. I'm heading out actually to the preseason game against the Packers on the 28th, so I'm going to get to go see several things and get the live football back into my veins as we're getting ready. I obviously, am very particular about my setup on real game days where I have a show afterwards and a post game show, but I try to soak in all I can when I don't have to have the full setup going. So really excited to be able to go out and see it in person, and I know it's been a blast to be able to cover, as I'm sure you've had the same experience.
Yeah, man, it's like I have to recondition my eyes to watch football live again. Like there's going to be an adjustment period because it's been a while since I've seen live football in front of me. So hopefully I shake off the rust quick because I can't wait to get in the stands.
I have faith, and I heard. Did you guys pick out the Texans game to come up with your lovely spouse?
Signed, sealed, deliver. Texans week 4 will be in the house. The other stuff to be determined. I'll definitely have a presence in the parking lots, before the game. But what I'm going to do Friday, Saturday, those types of things, I haven't quite hammered out those details. But we will be there, and I look forward to meeting a lot of people.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. So let's dive into the team itself. It's been an interesting camp so far. Obviously, the main takeaway, no huge injuries so far, nothing terribly concerning, but certainly a lot of names that have popped out and things there. So we'll start with, just some overarching things. What are some of the bigger surprises that you've seen so far through camp?
Biggest surprises so far through camp. Maybe it's just how positive the reports have been about so many of these young defensive ends. I was optimistic about Boogie Basham and Greg Rousseau and F.A. Obata and A.J. Epinesa taking a step forward. Some of those guys taking a step forward and some of those guys, being able to help the team as rookies. But it feels like every day I pull out, these great beat reporters that cover the team, whether it's the guys at The Athletic or Matt Perino with Syracuse.com or Sal Capaccio. I can't wait to read the practice reports And it's like, all right, every single time, F.A. Obata is balling out. Greg Rousseau is beating Darrell Williams. A.J. Epinesa is giving, unfortunately, probably Spencer Brown or Bobby Hart fits. So just hearing about these players coming into their own seemingly very quickly is probably the biggest surprise, because I thought there'd be a bit more of a curve.
Yeah, it's. I think it's a great call on the surprise, and I know, we talked last week with Sal that kind of the go-to phrasing was, "Hey, I know that Rousseau has the higher ceiling, but Boogie Basham's 2.5 years older. He's more pro ready. He might play more snaps and have a bigger impact early on." And I don't, I think it's very unfair to make any conclusions on a player that is very much going to be driven on their power, their ability to go inside when pads are on, real live game situations. So I'm not down on Boogie Basham in any means, but I certainly am surprised at how constant this, drumbeat has been for Gregory Rousseau. Just hearing, Matt Perino, you've referenced a lot of his reports on Locked On Bills that, he's even made comments about, hey, I didn't want to talk about Greg Rousseau today. I made it an intentional, choice to try to watch other guys, and he forces me to talk about him because he just keeps flashing. You obviously do a great deal more research and scouting and development there. Is there anything that, we had this conversation of, hey, what would it have been like if you played in the 2020 college season? That's what would we have needed to see. Is there anything in that gap of jumping there that now hearing these reports that connects for you, or how much of that is more of a pleasant surprise?
It's hard to comment on that specifically without having seen him play, because I haven't seen Greg Rousseau play a snap since 2019, Okay. So, and I liked what I saw, and he entered my draft rankings, my preliminary draft rankings going into the 2020 season as a top half of the first round type pick. But then as you distance yourself further and further from having seen him play, and keeping in mind that he's only really got one season of his entire life at defensive end, he's converted safety/wide receiver. And what he showed in that one season was really, really impressive. But that projection, that top half of the first round type grade, stemmed from the belief that he's going to take a step forward and continue to become a more refined football player at a position he was new at. And then when that didn't happen, you kind of have no choice but to leave him how you found him. You can't assume anything, right? I can't assume anything positive or negative when it comes to Gregory Rousseau when I haven't seen him do anything. And so I'm anxious to see him Friday night, and get a feel for how he's using his hands and his leverage and his vision, and how he sees the pocket and how he attacks the pocket. How he reads run. Does he squeeze? Is he able to anchor and play with extension? That's the stuff I'm going to be looking for on Friday night. That's probably going to be a better indicator of how I can bridge that gap. But, I have a lot of respect for these Bills beat reporters. They know football, and it's consistent. It's not just like one of them. It's all of them all the time.
Yeah.
And so that gives me a lot of optimism.
Absolutely. And I know on the opposite end of that spectrum, are there any names where we've heard some of the things that have come up and some of the comments that you maybe would be surprised to see it continue, or that you don't think we'll continue to hear it?
So I was ready for this to be Isaiah Hodgins.
Okay.
I feel like that's already happened. The sizzle's already happened, right? Like, he was the hot name coming out of OTAs, and then, I don't want to dunk on anybody. There's a lot left for Isaiah Hodgins to prove and go out and do and prove people wrong. But sure, my concern was when we get to scenarios where pads are on and he has to be physical and address contact, that some issues would present themselves, because I have no doubt about his route running and his ability to catch the football. But it's how does he beat press coverage? How does he get off contact? How does he separate? And so that is a question, and it feels like as we've gotten deeper into camp, and I think things have ramped up and the physicality has been there, and you're seeing full padded practices, he started to sizzle. Well, that wasn't my answer, so now I have to give you an actual answer. I feel like the name right now, the hot name right now that I think there's going to be some sizzle coming to is Darrell Johnson, defensive end. I've been a big fan of Darrell Johnson because I don't think it's normal to get 4 phases of special teams out of your defensive end 5 or 6 or whatever he's been. And that's been a huge bonus that he can, play defensive end in a pinch. You don't really want him to, but he can do it. But he's a really good 4-phase special teamer, and that brings a lot of value to the roster. Reminds me, who was that Buffalo Bills long snapper? I know he went to Notre Dame, and maybe he didn't go to Notre Dame. I'm not sure. Just randomly, he'd be rushing the passer as a defensive end, like in 2014 and 15. It was like all the time. You're like, why the hell's the long snapper rushing the passer? This name escapes me right now. Someone's going to drop it in the chat, I'm sure.
Sanborn.
Was it like Ryan Neal or something like that?
Okay.
He was like sometimes playing defensive end, and I damn near lost my mind every time. So he can, he just brings a lot of value. But it seems like Heath Farwell came out and said, the first player any coordinator talks to me about for my team is Daryl Johnson, and this guy is outstanding because he can hold up against double teams when he's running down the field on kickoff and not get washed out of his lane, and he brings all this value, and he's so big and so fast. And it feels like there was a glow up right there, right? Like as soon as those comments came out, you saw the positive remarks coming from the beat reporters. And let's face it, like Daryl Johnson is not that effective at defensive end. Like if you're a team that's at a different point in their life cycle and you don't have this type of developmental talent that exists, you could probably get more excited about Daryl Johnson. But right now he's defensive end 7. And I care. You know me, dude. I care a lot about special teams. But I just don't feel like this is a player that's going to make an impact come regular season or maybe even be on the roster when right now you're seeing things from Bills beat reporter articles that say things like he had a wow rep in practice in one-on-ones. I don't know. I don't want to get my hopes up on Daryl Johnson.
No, I think it's a great way to look at it with the assumption of development. Are things going to improve? We haven't seen the caliber of defensive end play needed, but we've had the luxury of, hey, we need special teams reps anyways, and now he makes sense to have game day active because he can, like you said, can play in a pinch. I think some of the things you've seen are going to be answered in the opposite direction. Can an F.A. Obata contribute on special teams? Can another guy that also does that but has more scrimmage value be able to contribute there? And I know that, I got into a debate with someone online today going back and forth, and I looked at the turnover from 2017 to 2018 to 2019 to 2020 in who played the most special team snaps year over year, because they were making the case that, hey, I think some of them, Matakevich, Tywan Jones, guys like that are kind of Saran Neal or locks. I said, yeah, I can see those. But he had Andre Smith and Daryl Johnson, both as roster locks because of their special teams role. And I said, I don't think they're unlikely. Like, I certainly can see the path where they can make the roster. But over the past 4 years, we've seen 70% turnover in who those like primary special teams guys were. It just hasn't been a consistent guy year to year to year, and maybe they want that and haven't been able to find it. But I'm really curious to see, and I think that there may be some guys we don't know. We obviously, one of the drumbeat names that's gone around is Jake Kumaro. He also can have some 4-phase special teams play. That wasn't a guy they had last year. If all of a sudden he's one of the wide receivers, that's one more contributor that's there. When I was at practice, I saw Matt Breida running a lot of special teams reps and going through as both as a gunner and from formation. That they're now trying to look at more ways, guys, that if you're going to be game day active, can you find a way to contribute in those roles? I'm curious to see. There's going to be some really tough ones, and we'll go through some of the position battles here, but I think Johnson is a great call in that name. Were there any others that stuck out as far as either a drumbeat you've heard consistently positively or someone that you thought would go away?
No, I think that the two poster childs have been Isaiah Hodgins and now Daryl Johnson for me. I think I've been relatively unsurprised by where a lot of the other reports have come from. So
Kumaro, you think, is someone who can sustain?
I think Kumaro's always been a darling of the preseason and training camp, right? Like that was his thing with Green Bay, and he was that guy that they fell for all the time. And has not really made an impact in the regular season, but I think for the type of offense that the Bills run, a lot of spread, a lot of space, it's going to give players like that opportunities to look really good. And we know he can play teams. So I guess I hear the positivity with Kumaro, but I just don't feel that element of surprise from me to really bring him up in this category.
No, I think that's fair. And obviously, he's shown to be a NFL roster caliber guy. This is not a shock that he's
right
in the running to earn a spot and make an NFL roster. Aaron Rodgers thinks he's the second best receiver on the Packers.
Right.
So obviously, there's people who think well of him. Let's go through a couple of the other position battles. We'll start off with one that I'm going to ask it in a way. Is it a position battle? Cornerback 2. I haven't found any evidence so far that this is a battle. That I think this is a starter and a backup. I haven't seen anything to the contrary thus far. It seems like this is Levi Wallace's job, and it would almost now be a surprise if it was even a rotation.
Yeah, I think end of May, early June, I got to a point where, look, I produce content, but I consume a lot of content, and I'm not super engaged all the time, but I do have a pulse, a feel for what's happening with, the Bills community on Twitter. And it got to the point where I felt like Levi Wallace was suddenly underrated. And I've beat the drum. I've wanted an upgrade to to CB2 opposite of Tre'Davious White. But the way that people were talking about Levi Wallace was just at a point where I'm like, it sounds like this guy can't even play in the NFL. And so I took the time to really dig into some analytics and talk about not just Levi Wallace's impact on the field, but how he's fared in different scenarios, and that he's been the primary starter opposite of Tre'Davious White, and the Bills have had elite pass defenses with him in it. And I try to talk everyone off the ledge, and I think I did a pretty good job about
I enjoyed that show greatly.
Well, thank you, and I encourage anyone to go back and listen to it. But the reality is that Leslie Frazier, Sean McDermott love Levi Wallace. They love him. And for Dane Jackson to come in, he would have to take that job. It wouldn't be a tie. He would have to have been decisively better, objectively better. And the reports have not indicated that that's been the case. And so I don't know that he can make up that ground. I think that this is a Levi Wallace scenario once again, opposite of Trey White.
Yeah, and we'll see. Obviously, we've shown in the past rotations with Kevin Johnson, rotations with Josh Norman. We obviously know there's an appetite for that in different ways, but we saw Cody Ford and Ty Nsekhe. They're obviously willing to have rotations at key spots. I even think there's value in the development opportunity that you have for live game reps, and to do that, I will say I was closer. Aaron was certainly right there with you. I was more in the mode going in. I think my default assumption was a rotation. I was expecting Levi Wallace to start, but a 60-40, 50-50 kind of split. And now, obviously we'll see in the games. I'm really excited to see Dane Jackson get extended playing time in the preseason games and to be able to go back and see that. But I right now, I certainly would be surprised at that rotation to take place if we see it. The next one I want to go into is at guard. Obviously, a little bit of a wrench initially with Ike Bacher had come in with a positive COVID test. He has exited the protocol and is now practicing and is now active in there. I was a little bit surprised that the first rotation we saw was Ike Bacher with John Feliciano rotating for first-team reps, and that it was Cody Ford staying in that spot. I think people's immediate assumption is that Feliciano is the firmer starter and the competition would more be Bacher and Cody Ford. So, one, I've been pleasantly surprised that it seems like there's some slightly more consistency and positive reporting for Cody Ford, or at least not terrible reports at Cody Ford. And I loved your comment on a recent show about some of the benefits that you saw for John Feliciano and talking about his fitness. So maybe touch on that for the folks here and what your thoughts have been on the guard play so far.
Yeah, so it sounds like we have a legitimate competition here, and I didn't necessarily anticipate that. I thought it would be Feliciano and Ford, but it sounds like Bacher is definitely in the mix, and I guess the first thing that signaled something to me was when we found out that Cody Ford was playing right guard and not left guard.
Yes.
And so and Feliciano's over at left guard, and I started to convince myself that it had something to do with Spencer Brown being at left tackle with Deion Dawkins out, and they wanted a more experienced player at left guard than Feliciano. But I think we've it's going to stay that way. I think that Ford is going to be at right and Feliciano at left, and then we'll see if Bakker can unseat either. But from the way Brandon Beane has spoken about Cody Ford and saying that he would be surprised if he wasn't one of the 5 starters, is interesting to me. But then I think about what Sean McDermott literally said this week about how it's an open competition. They've all had their days. They all have moments they want back. It doesn't matter what they've done in the past. It's what they can be right now. And availability is key. And when you think about Ford and Feliciano, they both have had tons of injuries in 2 seasons with the Bills. And, Bakker, he had the COVID situation, but, he's been healthy. And so, that could play into it as well. But, the John Feliciano fitness thing is something that's interesting to me because I'll be honest, I haven't been John Feliciano's biggest fan. I think he's been a good run blocker. I think he brings an edge to the offense. I love the way he interacts with the teammates, but I think in terms of just caliber of play, he's replacement level when you factor in his below average pass blocking with his average to maybe slightly above average run blocking. And I value the pass blocking component more, and that's where you see some lone lights. But he's down like 20 pounds. He's 305, and in the past he's pushed 325, 330, and I rarely think it's necessary for an offensive lineman to be that big. Like, I need you to be able to move and stay square, and, like Aaron Donald's going to be across from you. How are you going to stay in front of that guy? Like, you don't need bad weight, so you need to get your body in position where you can be springy and have that lateral mobility and be able to stay square to blocks more consistently. And so I'm hopeful that the loss of weight leads to, more nimble footwork and better pass blocking from John Feliciano. And I don't think it's going to have an impact on his run blocking. I think it's overstated. We just assume that guys that are 330, 340 plus are good run blockers. Well, you still have to be able to move and get yourself in position. Like there's a technique required. Like, being big helps if you can move. So I'm excited about that from John Feliciano. It gives me a renewed optimism when it comes to him. Sure. But man, like you mentioned the rotation thing with at corner with potentially Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson, and you referenced other times throughout the McDermott era where we've seen rotations with Inseki and Ford, with Norman and Wallace, with Ramon Humber and Matt Milano. Let's go, want to go way far back. I wouldn't discount that at guard, and they'll tinker with combinations. They're going to want to figure out which groupings they like the best, and I think there could be some experimentation with it to find out which trio which combo at guard you like the best. And I'm definitely not ruling out the rotation idea.
I could absolutely see that, and that's an easy one where you could even do it every 4th drive. You have an opportunity for Butker to go in. You give Feliciano a breather, you give Ford a breather, you keep a good solid player active and rotating in. I could absolutely see that, and I know we've seen comments that now Ryan Bates is solely focusing as backup center. I kind of like that if something were to happen to Mitch Morse, you don't have to do that domino effect multiple move. That was my most positive takeaway from that. Was a good, I want an actual backup center, not that, Feliciano's got to kick over and now he's playing a new position and a different guard coming in. I actually didn't mind that idea either, and something that I was pleased to see. I give people a hard time about Ryan Bates with he plays all 5 positions. None of them all that well. I'd love for him to focus on one and see, hey, do we have something here that can actually be a productive player? It sounds great that you could step in at all these places. I want to see him do one really well that we could feel good about. I was pleased to see him focusing in on that.
Yeah, so like 2 things come to mind there. I'll never forget listening to the Spot Rack podcast, and Sal Capaccio went on there and talked about the extension. I think it was either Milano or Darrell Williams. I can't remember. It was before Williams was re-signed. So at some point before Williams was re-signed, and Sal hinted at the idea that Ryan Bates could be looked at as a starting right tackle.
I remember that.
I'm like, oh my God, Sal said that? And so it led me to think that maybe they were considering him more at tackle, especially when you consider last year that when Morse went out, Feliciano went over to center. And so I did think that it was going to be a similar scenario where, all right, Morse goes out, Feliciano to center, and then you just do the musical chairs from there. But I do think that it would be better for the Bills to just change one spot as opposed to 2. if Mitch Morse goes down. But what do you make of this, Greg? If I can put you in the analyst position here, what do you make of two things? Number one, Feliciano and some of his social media, what do you call it? Presence or activity
stances.
Or stances, where it felt like he was pining for that center role, right? Like throughout the offseason. And then you find out that Mitch Morse was kind of on the chopping block and he took a restructure to stay in town. And then you think about the low-hanging fruit that exists on this team to create some cap space next year, whether that's moving on from Feliciano or Morse. Those are both opportunities. Like, how do you think what's the long-term plan here at center? Maybe it's Ryan Bates. Like, maybe that's what they're thinking about. Like,
it's not crazy. I think they've obviously shown a penchant to invest in center.
Yeah.
That it's something they prioritize, they value. So I'd be a little bit surprised if they simply turned it to Bates, but I do think it's not out of the realm of possibility that there would be a substantial investment in early draft pick or another free agent signing if they did move on from one. I don't know if I think in theory centers make a little bit more than guards on average, so maybe Feliciano is thinking about his next contract. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah.
I don't know where some of it. I don't know where half the stuff he comes from is. He's fun talking about UFC. He's pretty good with a lot of the fights. But
unless you're watching him on DVR and not live.
You have to mute him on fight night if you're not watching it live. But yeah, he's an interesting dude. So it's hard to know. He jokes a ton. He's always usually pretty lighthearted online, so it's hard to know how much is serious and what's not.
To create a stir sometimes, which is like anti me.
Oh yeah,
I don't like that at all.
And Sean McDermott either.
Right.
So it's I'll change around the order a little bit here. With the comment about where Bates is focusing now, with the comments of, and it always comes up when you have a great day on offense and in training camp, people ask, "Oh, is there a problem with the defense?" If you have a great day the other way around, obviously the natural counter to, "Oh my gosh, all the good defensive ends look good." Do we have a tackle problem? Do we have one? Do we even have a swing tackle at this point? And by default, it has to be Sheldon Brown. We need it to be Spencer Brown. We need it to be him because no one wants it to be Bobby Hart. It's pretty clearly not Tommy Doyle yet. I don't know. Have they seen concerns that they would ask Bates to start focusing there again? I never thought I would miss Ty Nsekhe, but here I am.
So I am unsurprised that Spencer Brown has had some struggles. He didn't play last year, only has 2 seasons of his entire life where he actually played football games at offensive tackle and, played tight end in high school is part of 8-man football. So expecting him to come in day one and be this lockdown offensive tackle against all these really talented defensive ends that the Buffalo Bills have, I don't think is a realistic expectation. What you want to be mindful of with Spencer Brown, and this is not really anything we could answer because we're not around the guy every single day, is you want to see how he's taking to that coaching and failing forward and learning what it's going to take to get into your pass sets in the NFL and where to strike your hands and what your leverage points are and how to stay square and mirror and remain coordinated and under control. There's a lot of learning that goes into it. And so I think he's failing forward. I think having some bad reps and getting beat a lot right now is okay because I think he's going to grow from that as long as he's got that mindset, which you would have to think if the Bills drafted somebody in the 3rd round that they've done their homework on this guy and know that he can, withstand some of those issues and get better from them. And so I think it's okay that he's had these issues, and I think he needs a lot of reps. Just keep playing him, keep coaching him because he's the best athlete on the team, Greg. He's literally the best athlete on the team. So stick with it and hopefully he can be the guy. But hopefully Dawkins and Williams are, just stalwarts like they were last year. We don't have to worry about this. But there can't be a scenario where Bobby Hart's on the field. It can't happen.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, from the wisdom of Adam Gase's dog, I almost wonder if early in the season – I think at some point you cross a threshold where you become comfortable with Spencer Brown playing if he needs to be one of the guys. If for some reason anyone missed time at tackle early in the season, I almost wonder if Botker being put in and putting Ford out to tackle is the lesser of evils early on when you're talking about protecting Josh Allen.
That's a possibility. I think Ryan Bates, to bring up another name,
Yeah,
if like you're more comfortable with him at left tackle, put him there. If you're more comfortable with Cody Ford at right tackle, put him there and use some of that interior flexibility that you have. Even Forrest Lamp, who just, he's had that calf injury, so we haven't heard much about him. Like, he can play left tackle. Exhaust those options before you cross your fingers and put Spencer Brown in there when he's not ready to go.
But yeah, ultimately, we need Deion Dawkins and Darrell Williams to play. And I joked, I know you had done some really interesting shows on who the most valuable, irreplaceable, player like that is. And obviously, it's Josh, but I think a lot of other folks have, Trey White, Stephon Diggs, rightfully players, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer. After seeing the training camp elements and what it was like going 2 weeks without Deion Dawkins, he shot right to the top of my list of, I don't want to know what life is like without a franchise left tackle. I'm good having Deion in there as soon as possible.
And I think it's like the appreciation for him after seeing, thanks to you, a lot of clips of Bobby Hart playing badly and just the reports and just having watched Bobby Hart play in the NFL for years now. The appreciation for Deion Dawkins is at an all-time high.
Yeah. And I do think, obviously, he was formally removed from the protocol list.
Was there a corresponding transaction to that? I was pretty unplugged today.
No, because he still counted. You were still, even if you're on the protocol list, you still counted as in the 91. Okay. So they didn't need to make a corresponding move to do so. Although I do think someone got put on a reserve list.
I know Markel Lee.
Yeah. So I don't believe they were obligated to do that, but I do think Markel Lee got put on the, I don't know if it was the reserve pup or which. There's a couple different ones during preseason they can use, but he was put on one of the injured lists as well. The last one for the position battles here, obviously there's no real battle in the linebacker group. We know the top two, but there was a lot of talk, excitedly, about the depth brought in at linebacker, and that, you brought up Markel Lee, bringing back Andre Smith played a key role in special teams. Tyrell Dotson actually had some flashes. Eric did a couple nice film breakdowns of, hey, maybe we got something here. Obviously, AJ Klein had the roller coaster of all roller coaster seasons with, people out with, pitchforks and get ready to get him out of there. And then all of a sudden he's the player of the game with Russell Wilson. Tyrell Adams was a name that I certainly was intrigued by. You look at his season last year with Houston. Another spot where I hope it doesn't matter. I hope we don't really need to see it. But is that certainly one you're intrigued to see maybe as the games get a little bit more rolling?
For sure. Backup linebacker is absolutely fascinating to me, especially because if I'm not mistaken, wasn't the depth chart came out and I think it was Dotson and Klein.
Dotson and Klein, and even after that, they had Matakevich and Smith, and had Adams and Markel Lee fourth set.
So you figure they're going to keep 5 or 6,
It's one of the most obvious ones when everyone debates on the depth at wide receiver, the depth of defensive line, the depth at offensive line. One of the easiest ones to be like, maybe we go a little bit short. Linebacker's the easiest one to pluck at.
So you think they're going to go 5?
I would prefer 6 because I think that's where your more versatility in special teams comes from. Mm-hmm. But I think with a guy like Kumaro and his contributions, and I believe we're going to see contributions from F.A. Obata on special teams, I think that lets you keep a 10th defensive lineman if you go 5 linebackers.
So if they keep 5, we're talking Edmonds, Milano, Matakevich, Dotson, Smith?
Klein.
Klein. So that can't happen. One of those players can't make the team.
Smith or Dotson. One of Smith or Dotson.
Wow. Man, they like Dotson, right? Because they stuck with him. He was a UDFA, had some trouble early on, and flashed occasionally in preseason several years ago. And he's been part of this team for a while. Yeah. And then obviously they traded for Andre Smith. They gave him a new contract.
If you go on a per game basis, in his 11 games last year, he played the second most
Wow.
special team snaps. It
Dude.
looks like he's 5th or 6th, but he actually only played 11 games. He played right there, like, Matakevich would be 35, 38, 32. Those are the exact same kind of snap counts that Andre Smith was. He was playing every single special teams phase.
Greg, Brandon Beane is a wonderful general manager. Could not be happier to have him running this football operation. But can you explain this A.J. Klein contract to me? Because that's the problem right here.
Yeah. Well, and every once in a while, we've obviously shown that Beane is pretty. One, he's not infallible. Obviously, every general manager has misses. Every general manager has opportunities to take DK Metcalf when they take Cody Ford. It happens to the best of them.
Couldn't be me. Couldn't be me.
They're obviously, we are very fortunate that he won NFL Executive of the Year last year because he had a lot more hits than he had misses. The other part is, even his misses, he's pretty good at scraping back some money. He gets an awful lot of them to give a little bit back. But man, some of those we are going to be forced to make some difficult decisions with. Star Lotulelei is a true financial lock. Like, he costs more to cut than he does to keep. But then we have a couple with A.J. Klein, with Vernon Butler, less so Mario Addison. His name gets brought up a lot. I actually think
the bad contracts go to the former Panthers.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And that all four of them, with those connections. There's going to be some tough ones where, whatever you want to call it, sunk cost fallacy, some of the different logic that's there, they need to be making the best football decision. And there's the one that sticks out to me. They're not doing anything with Star. I think Mario Addison's good enough to be on this team, let alone should not be a cut. I think he's a deserved. People got frustrated they didn't have another 9 or 10 sack season, and then dismissed the fact that he had 54 pressures and 5.5 sacks.
Yeah, he played too much too.
Correct. Like, he wasn't bad. He just wasn't as great as people wanted.
He is the person that's most responsible for the Hail Murray, by the way. Just want to most responsible.
It wasn't his. It wasn't his finest moment. You go in those combinations. Could they just pay Vernon Butler to go away? Could they just, it costs the same. They're not going to save any money to release him. It's going to cost the same whether he plays for us or not. Can Brandon Beane pull a rabbit out of a hat and get a team to give us a 2024 7th round pick?
Because they could save $3 million from trading Addison. No,
or Butler.
Or is it both?
Yeah, well, it's because in part both players, part of the compensation for taking a pay cut was converting over some into not likely to be earned incentives and some into guaranteed salary. So they got more guaranteed in exchange for reducing the total. So now when it's guaranteed, if you cut them, it doesn't help us any. But if you trade someone, the guaranteed salary goes with. So both players, we would benefit. We would save money by trading them. We would not save by cutting them. So when you get into the Marshall Newhouse and the Russell Bodine and the various players that have been traded, that is something that's going to come up this year that, I don't expect there's anyone. It's a lot easier to sell a $3 to $4 million defensive lineman than it is to sell a $5 million linebacker. But so A.J. Klein ain't going anywhere. Nobody's taking that contract.
Nobody.
But I will say, Beane was also pretty good at, he got guys to take pay cuts, like genuine pay cuts, not restructures. The restructures that kick the can down the road and simply push dead cap into future years because you're just trying to create cap space, he did not do that. We could walk away from A.J. Klein next year almost completely free. So that was the discipline of saying, hey, I probably could have tried to negotiate something to reduce his number, but then he's on the team for 2 years. If we just take our medicine, it's 1 year and then we walk. That was at least a more disciplined approach to, obviously, an overpaid signing at the time. As we go in, there's one phase I want to be able to give a little bit of our attention over to our friends at Uncle Jumbo's, and obviously they've been a fantastic sponsor for us and someone that goes through there. And my spotlight was, I didn't have a chance to talk to you about Josh Allen's contract and being able to have for the first time in our adult lives, we have a franchise quarterback, and we have a guy who is worth being paid an awesome amount of money. And a lot of people kicked around, hoping that you'd get some kind of hometown discount or something crazy where he was going to take less money. I told people every time that came up, that's absolutely crazy. I don't know if it's going to be 41 or 41 and a half or 42 or 43. It's going to be in that ballpark. But the one area we may get some team-friendly element, or whatever you want to call a hometown discount, isn't going to be on the number. It's going to be on the structure, and that the Josh is going to be willing to set things up to give the team some flexibility, that they can do option bonuses, convert pieces over from a roster bonus to a signing bonus, kick the can down the road in years that they may want to, eat it all at once in a year that they have the cap space for when the TV contracts money starts going up. What were some of your takeaways besides the relief of knowing that for 8 more seasons, through his age 32 season and through 2028, we are going to have Josh Allen to root for as a Buffalo Bills quarterback?
Man, I feel a lot of different things. The length is key here, right? Like you saw Dak took 4 years, 160, and that just does not create any flexibility at all for Dallas, who has a ton of bad contracts that are holding them back.
He is $40 million every single year, every single year of that deal.
Even like the Kirk Cousins deal, which was a fully guaranteed deal, so that was as easy as it takes. For Josh to be willing to go as long as he did, and like you said, he's paid through age 32?
Yes, through age 32. He'll be a free agent at age 33. He
could have done a different type of deal that set himself up for another contract when he's 28 or 29. So
yes,
it's weird saying that somebody who just got a contract that can pay him north of $250 million did something generous, but the length of this contract is absolutely critical. And you've heard Brandon Beane talk about that multiple times, and you've heard Josh Allen specifically say that he's willing to allow things to move around, and he doesn't care. He doesn't have an ego as to how or where the money gets to him. So whatever the team needs to do to create cap space when necessary, it sounds like he's going to be willing to do that. And so that length component of this contract is one that really reigns heavily on my mind. The other part that I guess somewhat irks me is this thought out there, and I haven't seen it a lot, and so it's probably not, we shouldn't harp on this too hard, but I've had people email me and send me messages and stuff like, Josh Allen shouldn't have taken that big of a contract. He could have got paid $30 million a year, and the team would have had more cap space, and there's nothing you can do with $30 million that you can't, nothing you can do with $43 million that you can't do with $30 million a season. And they just thought he was more of a team guy. And you see this stupid graphic out there about Tom Brady and how much money he's made in his career compared to what Josh Allen could make in this contract. And it's like, why are we comparing quarterbacks that were drafted in 2001 to a present? Like, that's not a one-for-one. That's not, and it's creating bad discussion and bad thoughts about the deal that Josh Allen signed. Like, $10 million or $13 million is $13 million. Like, yeah. And there's such a, like, if Josh Allen does that, that affects every quarterback contract that goes forward. Like, the Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson would light his house on fire.
Yeah. Well, and his agent and everyone else involved. And that, I always, it's certainly easier to take a team-friendly discount when the New England Patriots and Gillette Stadium's preferred therapeutic vendor is the TB12 method, that they're able to pay an undisclosed sum to Alex Guerrero, and all the money obviously only went to Alex Guerrero. None of that money ever went to anyone other than Alex Guerrero with the name of TB12. So yeah, it's helpful when you can take a discount when there's other elements. And not to get into when you go through, it's always a good policy not to tell someone else how much money they should make, but that it didn't hurt that Tom Brady's wife is worth more than him. Right. Like, Tom Brady is making less money in the relationship between he and his wife, who is a $100 million plus supermodel. It helps that you're able to make different financial decisions. But yeah, it's something where there was never going to be a possibility to do that. Josh didn't push for what he could have and just gone for straight guaranteed money, shorter term deal, go 4 years. He didn't have to tack it on after the fourth and fifth year. He could have just waited. He could have pushed down the path of forcing them to franchise tag him like Dak Prescott did, like Kirk Cousins did, then pushing for guaranteed money and just getting, probably 4 years at $45 million, say nope, that's all I want, and then all of a sudden can turn around at 28 and be a free agent again. He did plenty of team friendly elements in this while making a great deal of money.
If Josh Allen goes out and replicates what he did last year, and this contract isn't done, he says, I want the Mahomes deal. I want 40. I want over 45.
45 with the ability to make 50, because Mahomes can make 503 over 10 years if he hits the numbers.
So that's the implication. The benefit for this not getting done would have been towards Josh, because even if the season goes south, 2020 still happened, and Dak got paid based off of a relatively small sample size. Josh would have still got the same deal. So I feel weird talking about the generosity of Josh Allen in this, because he's obviously created generational wealth for him and his family, and he has a unique skill set and wonderful story. All that is very inspiring to me, but there are dynamics in play here that are very favorable when it comes to the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, and there's pieces we'll see as it comes together. Nora Princiati was on the Ringer NFL show with your former colleague and now new addition, Benjamin Solak, and they were going through the 5 best rosters in the NFL. Everyone, the entire group with Kevin Clark, Nora Princiati, and Ben all had the Bills as a top 5 roster in the NFL. When they were talking about Josh Allen's contract, Nora Princiati had laid it out that she felt that there was going to be a time during Josh Allen's contract where it was going to look like a great value and a discount, and in that moment there were going to be multiple years left in the contract. And he said that they brought up how Brandon Beane got Deion Dawkins signed before multiple other tackles, got Trey White signed before multiple other cornerbacks, got these deals done before other guys really increased the market rate at that spot. And that, once you see some of the other contracts come through, when Kyler Murray signs, and when you see Joe Burrow sign, and when you see some of these other contracts come through and Justin Herbert signs and all these other ones come up, there's going to be a window where, just like people had their minds blown when Matt Ryan got his deal and he's now the 13th highest paid quarterback or the 16th highest paid quarterback, there's value in getting longer term deals done early, and we are going to see that value with Josh Allen.
It's just like with Patrick Mahomes. He signed for 45 a season. At the time, I think the highest paid quarterback in the NFL was at 35.
Yeah.
And since you've had Watson, you've had now Josh Allen, you've had Dak, and all of a sudden that gap is not that big, right? Now Patrick Mahomes' contract suddenly looks like a bargain.
Yeah, it's incredible the way that it's gone through, and we'll see where that goes. Obviously, Josh Allen still has to have another very strong year. Has to be able to step forward and do a lot of good things here to be able to make it prove out to be able to go through. But that'll be an interesting path to be able to look at. So as we kind of go forward, anybody who has any questions for Joe, make sure to throw them out now. We'll start to wrap things up here and be able to take it home for what we have. One question that came in here, have we seen anything from Tommy Doyle showing flashes of traits? You brought up how phenomenal of an athlete Spencer Brown is. Tommy Doyle scored out pretty darn well himself. Yep. I'm not down on anything for him, but I never had early expectations either. I don't know how much Miami, Ohio film you were able to go through, but what were your thoughts on what we were getting when we drafted Tommy Doyle?
I thought he was drafted at the appropriate range, and obviously he's a physical run blocker, which pops on tape, but I didn't feel like his coordination was nearly as good as Spencer Brown in pass protection in terms of just body distribution, posture, trusting to bend his knees and to just be a little bit more in control of his frame. So I thought he had a little bit more technical work to be done, but never a player that I expected to see the field in year one.
Yeah. I think that's very fair, and I think that that's a good way to look at it. One of the names we didn't really touch on here when we talked about the defensive line rotation, do you think Harrison Phillips is going to make this team? I was a little surprised to see Justin Zimmer put ahead of him on the depth chart officially.
Yeah, and I think some of the practice reports have not been very favorable regarding Harrison Phillips, and I think it's challenging because he's such a likable player in terms of his personality.
Walter Payton Man of the Year candidate.
Yeah, I mean, it's all that stuff, right? He's great for the locker room. He's always like at the facility. You can see him in a lot of promo stuff. And, I remember I was at the Senior Bowl when Harrison Phillips was there, and you felt that. Like you could just feel it. And when he came onto the field, he's got a kid on his shoulders and an American flag running on. Like, he's that likable guy. But his football is pretty average to below average. And he's had injuries. And I don't know. I don't think he's a lock, especially because it feels like Justin Zimmer is really creating a lot of buzz. We've already talked about Vernon Butler and just how difficult his contract is. And I think that probably puts him on the roster. I don't think they're keeping 5.
No.
So I think preseason will be big, and I'm hopeful. I mean, it's a contract year for Harrison Phillips. And it was interesting. I think I read an article today, maybe yesterday, about some comments that Harrison Phillips made that, it's not that he's just going out there in preseason to put good tape out there so that he can make the Bills roster. He's like, I got to pop to other teams as well. It's kind of a weird thing to say, right? Like, to at least let that slip a little bit, that your focus is somewhat larger than just what you have to do to make this Bills team. You're thinking about that. He admitted that in a quote that I read recently.
It's a very honest moment from him, and it would be, I think even if we don't expect them to say that out loud, it would be naive to think that he does. He talked about, I think he talked about, it's hard not to do the numbers game.
Yeah.
When you're sitting there and watching all these guys blow up and make great plays, and you think that Darryl Johnson isn't having the exact same experience, F.A. Obata isn't having the exact same experience, Justin Zimmer isn't having the exact same experience, just looking through, man, where do you see these different pieces coming in? It's going to be a tough one to be able to determine. So we'll see where it goes. I am starting to now lean less than 50-50 on Harrison Phillips. I don't think he's an obvious cut. I think there's absolutely a path for him to make the team. I'm starting to lean less than 50-50 in where that falls.
How much do you think having 16-man practice squads again in the call-up rules and the IR rules again in place this year, how much do you think that factored into the decisions that every team has, but we're focusing on the Bills here? How much do you think Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane are thinking about ability to get on the practice squad? Like, cut ability, and I know that I think you're the one that has the great statistic about amount of players that are cut and how many actually get
really
picked up by other teams. It's very, very rare, but
Vincent Taylor was our first in like 4 years.
Like, do you think that plays into it? Players that you think you can get back on the practice squad?
So last year, obviously, there was a caveat of the protocols, the additional testing, the inability to have multiple guys in for workouts. So it was artificially deflated last year. It is lower than people normally think it is anyways. That was the statistic you referenced. I showed that, hey, not all that many guys get claimed overall. We know about the handful, but it's like a lot of years it's 8 in the whole league.
Yeah.
So 8 guys out of the, literally close to 1,000 that get cut when you go from 90 to 53. And the amount that's there, it's a substantial amount. And like 8 get claimed, or 12 or 14. Like, it's not one from every team. It's not multiple. Whenever every fan base does the exact same thing, oh man, we're never going to get him through waivers. Yeah, right. You probably will. Yeah, you probably can. Once you get into that now, and I think part of the way you were angling this question is, if you're Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott and you're looking at this and does draft position come into play? Are those things where are people going to take a shot because it's a form, so is Harrison Phillips' former third round status more dangerous than Justin Zimmer's more recent film? Justin Zimmer's older than Harrison Phillips. Are there, different things like that?
Yeah.
Is there some game theory that goes on here of, hey, we think we could probably sneak this guy through, but we're not sure? There are pieces of that come into play. Also, you get into the vested veteran status. So for anyone who's not familiar, if you're a vested veteran, which means you have 4 years of contract status within the NFL, you don't have to go through waivers. You immediately just become a free agent and can choose whether to sign elsewhere or not, like last year when they kept Isaiah Hodgins and then put him on the injured reserve and had Andre Roberts go wait in the parking lot and then gave him a nice $30,000 signing bonus for coming back in the building.
Dude, some of that's going to happen.
I'm certain of it. I'm certain of it.
Who's the Andre Roberts this year? That's a great way to put it. I like that.
So I actually did the research. I actually went through and found, so we have a handful that are in that spot, and the handful who are over the vested veteran amount being paid the minimum and didn't get a very big signing bonus. You have Forrest Lamp, you have Andre Smith, you have... No, I take that back. Andre Smith's too young. He doesn't have the vested veteran years. Forrest Lamp, Matt Breida. There were 3. I don't know. I don't think Ryan Bates has the years yet to do it. And there was one more. I mean, technically, the specter of Bobby Hart would count, but we're not going to count that. But those are the kind of guys that you're talking about here, whereas players like Efe Obada has a lot of guarantees in his contract. You're not really going to be able to do that. Tywan Jones actually has a pretty good amount of guarantees. Yep. Tywan Jones is not going anywhere. It would have to be like a Matt Breida, a Forrest Lamp, and Isaiah McKenzie. Those are the kind of guys that you would try to set up and structure to be able to bring back in. Jake Kumro. Jake Kumro was the other one that was there. And Justin Zimmer is a tough one because age-wise and history, he technically should, but I honestly don't know if he has actually earned 4 vested years of playing time to count. I don't, so I'm not counting him, but he's 28 and has been kicking around the league for quite a while, and been around since before 2016. So I in theory, maybe he is, but those are the names. Kumaro, Breida are the 2 most obvious of guys that I expect to make the team. That they could just pay them to go sit in the parking lot. But those are the kind of guys that are Brandon Powell would be. But those are the guys I would expect.
It's gonna be fun. They're gonna do some hurdles, man.
Yeah,
kind of save a player or 2.
Oh yeah. Oh, they'll be sneaky.
I'll overreact to it. It's going to be great.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. How did they cut Jake Kumaro and keep Marcus Stevenson? I can't believe it. This is madness. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be for one day. It's going to be for one day. And the next day, Marcus Stevenson is going to have a procedure on a core muscle injury.
Right.
And they're going to...
hangnail or something.
Yeah, man, we're going to have to go get this fixed. When those things come up, they don't actually fabricate injuries, but you have a lot of guys who are drafted with stuff. They're like, hey, you never really got fixed. We're going to go get that taken care of now. We think it's better for sustainability. Like Isaiah Hodgins' shoulder. Like, he didn't injure his shoulder. Like, he had that since college. He just, like, hey, we're going to have you go take care of that now. We'll figure that out
took
later.
a while for him to come back from, too. Like, I was surprised because I thought it was definitely like, little gymnastics. All right, this is what it is. And then he got back later than expected. It, got shut down quick, and he was in the red jersey for a while. So I underestimated that shoulder situation.
Just one of the last ones here. Who are some of the biggest cut down day trade candidates that you could see? I know we already threw out Butler and Addison. Are there any other guys that you could see? We've seen it on the front lines historically. It's been a lot of offensive linemen, a lot of defensive linemen. Is there anybody else outside of there, or is there anyone on those groups that we haven't talked about that you wouldn't be shocked if we saw them shipped out of town?
Yeah, I think the obvious place to look is offensive line, where the Bills have a ton of veteran depth, and we've seen Brandon Beane flip that in the past, whether it's been Marshall Newhouse or Russell Bodine or Wyatt Teller. Like, this has been the area where Brandon Beane's been able to recap something for a player he was going to cut, and we know that offensive line depth in the NFL is pretty weak. So I can see that being a spot, and you have experienced players like Jamil Douglas, Forrest Lamp, Jordan Devey, maybe Bobby Hart, maybe. Like, these are players. Caleb Benenoch has, experience in the NFL, 20-something starts. So I think one of those players or a couple of those players are the ones that stand out to me as potential trade candidates. And then maybe Daryl Johnson is, if he's
maybe
really,
Harrison Phillips.
Maybe Harrison
They're
Phillips.
both very cheap.
Yeah, it's not like you're giving up, you're absorbing a whole lot if you're acquiring those players. I mean, if Daryl Johnson is this key valuable special teamer, and you're damn near sure that if you waive him, he'll be one of those few players that are plucked and signed to a team because of what he can do running down the field on kick and punt. Like, all right, that seems like a reasonable player to ship out as well.
And when people might ask, like, oh, well, why don't they just wait and claim him? Well, what if the team that's interested is the Packers or the Buccaneers or, the Washington football team, and you won your division last year and you're not at the top of the waiver order, and you're concerned that, if a 6'7" defensive end with special teams ability gets waived, he's probably going to get picked up. That's the exact kind of guy that somebody will give a 6th, a 7th, a day 3 pick. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, we'd rather give that up and actually get that guy than, worry that we're going to get him on waivers when multiple teams are likely to be able to put in a claim.
Exactly.
So as we go through our final element here, what are you looking forward to most watching tomorrow night with this preseason opener? What's something that maybe we haven't got a chance to see in the practice reports or in what's going on there that we're going to get in the real live bullets?
I think there's just a lot of young players that we haven't seen that have come onto the team over the last 2 years, whether that's Jake Fromm, who I'm not as big as fan, but I want to see him play. I want to see what he can do out there.
Talk about a cut-down day trade candidate.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
Quarterbacks are valuable. I've seen it in the contract.
Yeah. it's true. I want to see these young defensive ends. I want to see these young offensive linemen. I want to see Jaquan Johnson, Josh Thomas, DeMar Hamlin, these young corners, Griffin, McLeod, Wild Goose. So it's the players that I don't feel like I know them yet. That's where my eyes are going to be. I don't need to see 17 or 14 or 27 or
literally not once.
Like I know those players. There's nothing to learn. So show me these young guys, and let's hope they make some plays. And the last time the Bills had a preseason, they went 4-0, right? It had the big drive at the end, Tyree Jackson to David Sills. We all lost our minds. So look, Bills preseason football's back. Disappointing.
AJ McCarron comeback
season. Man, we're not going to see Christian Wade, though, are we? So
not in the first game. Game. But that group is the one that I'm most excited
running
about.
Backs?
Running backs and linebackers. Those are the two that you get the least out of in practices, because it really is like, hey, I get thud, but did you actually follow through and make the tackle? Or, hey, right. I get the wrap and release, but like, hey, could you have broken that tackle? That's what you see in real game. So I always like the running backs and the linebackers, even the safeties. Like, you don't really get to play safety. Everybody went crazy about the Dawson Knox touchdown in the stadium game, but then when you really looked at it, an awful lot of people were like, yeah, Jaquan Johnson would have lit him up pretty good. I don't know if he would actually.
He would have caught it, damn it, Greg. It would have been secured.
Oh, don't worry. I heard the way that you described the drop touchdown on the show. You're very, very quick to dismiss. Don't worry.
Hey,
There's been a lot of other good reports. It's only one drop. Don't worry.
I had the courtesy to acknowledge it. I could have not, but I had the intellectual integrity to make sure I referenced it very briefly.
I will say I am very excited. I already got some people chirping at me. Apparently, Tyree Jackson made quite a few catches in the Eagles preseason game tonight, and I already had people asking me like, "Well, why was Dawson Knox the converted tight end that we kept? We couldn't keep Logan Thomas. We couldn't keep Tyree Jackson. We picked Dawson Knox as the." So I really want to be wrong. I really want to be wrong. I want him to have a great season. There's so much attention elsewhere on the offense. I want him to flourish, and I hope to
sounds
bathe
like
in
he's
it.
doing well, man. Jacob Hollister. Maybe he'll be the answer.
Yeah, no, I like it. When people brought up how different he is and how much he sticks out, he's not. We have a type. We have a prototype at tight end. It is that 6'5", 6'6", 250, big, top-heavy guy. That's what we like. And Jacob Hollister's not that. He is a nifty, quick, shifty, smaller, lighter guy. Maybe that's something fun to be able to play with and see where it goes.
I want credit for the Tyree Jackson conversion to tight end because I suggested that while I was watching him play quarterback at Buffalo.
Yeah, pre-draft, before.
I was never in on this guy as a quarterback. I get plenty of things wrong, so I got to spike the football every once in a while.
It's not gonna spike itself.
No, it won't.
So, all right. Well, for everybody who's been listening tonight, thank you very much to Joe. If you enjoyed Joe's takes tonight, make sure you're checking him out over on Draft Dudes podcast. We have all kinds of good things going on there, letting you know what's going on with the NFL draft year round. Obviously, with the Locked On Bills podcast, so many of you are already loyal subscribers and listeners over there, and his work on the Draft Network overall and everything that you do for the draft year round. Joe, thank you very much for your time tonight. We really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Greg. The only disappointment I have is I intended to stop at the local store here and get some Screwball whiskey to consume tonight on the stream, but I didn't have time for that.
I am excited to see that. My mom's ready to make like Reese's Peanut Butter Cup White Russians with Screwball peanut butter whiskey. Yes, no messing around. My mom sending me messages for it. I was just very excited about it. It's great. Well, thank you very much for your time tonight. We appreciate it. Thank you guys very, very much. Remember to check out our sponsors over at Underdog Fantasy. Download it. Use the promo code COVER1. You're able to get $25 free. Check it out. I've already done a ton of drafts on there. Having a great time. Looking forward to it. Check out our friends over at Uncle Jumbo's. Make sure you're listening to the other shows here. Anthony Prohaska and I will be on tomorrow night live right after the game, doing a live post-game show on Disguise coverage, being able to check everything out. And then this weekend doing another new show on Cover One Fantasy. So on behalf of Joe Marino, on behalf of Aaron Quinn, who will be back next week, I am Greg Thompson. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.